First of all, let's talk about what I call the hyperlapse paradox. And it's that hyperlapses, in essence, are very simple and very difficult. They are very hard to do. I remember why I don't do that many hyperlapses and time lapses. It took like 2 hours to get like 60 seconds worth of usable footage. If you look at this time lapse, this was just me walking with 1 frame per second, and as you can see, it's really shaky. Even if I put something like warp stabilizer, which my program doesn't have, on this, it still wouldn't look very good. I mean, it works if you're like doing a half-second clip or 1 second clip. It wouldn't be that big of a deal for something like a vlog, but for like professional hyperlapses, that's not good enough. We had to have something more stable than that. Now, just as a note, if you're going to do a fire, like, for one, check all your local laws, make sure it's okay. But then, always keep a hose handy because you gotta be safe. Safety first, guys. I did figure out that if you put it to 1 frame every 4 seconds, then it looks a little bit more stable. The movement is not as exaggerated because there's so much forward movement between each shake. But even then, it doesn't look great. And my goal is to try and get great images out of the M50. If you don't have any kind of stabilizer, you can get hyperlapses just walking, but they're not going to be that good. You're not going to be able to get professional quality hyperlapses just shooting them handheld, at least not from what I've experienced. And unfortunately, what that means is that we have to use some sort of a stabilizer, either a gimbal or a Steadicam, in order to get really good hyperlapses with the Canon M50. And so for the rest of the hyperlapses in this video, I use the Moza Air 3-axis gimbal, the first one, not the number 2 version. Now, before you ask, no, I do not own this gimbal. I borrowed it from a friend, and no, I would not suggest this gimbal because the M50 is just on the lower end weight of it, and so it's really hard to balance the M50 on this gimbal because the M50 is such a light camera. And the first one of those is one that I did with the time-lapse movie mode on the M50, and I did it for 1 shot every 3 seconds. Now, I actually think that this turned out really good, besides the fact that I did a very bad job of pointing the gimbal in the right direction. I kept starting to turn it either to the right or to the left, and then kind of spinning it back, and so I did have that problem, as you can see here. But overall, I think that this actually turned out really good. The gimbal smoothed out all of the jitters that we had in the handheld version, but one of the biggest problems with the time-lapse movie mode on the M50 is the fact that there's no motion blur. It will only allow your shutter to go down to 1/30th of a second. And when you're just throwing it on auto, which is what I did, yes, I used automatic mode. But a way that I found of putting a little bit more motion blur in your videos is actually to just shoot a regular video, and with the M50 it allows you to lower your shutter to 1/8 of a second. Keep in mind that this way of doing hyperlapses will not work handheld. I have tried it numerous times trying to just speed it up. It has always looked way more shaky than, well, I thought was worth it. It was really bad. So when I was shooting the time lapse for this video, I didn't even try it. I just used it on the gimbal. And one thing that this does that the other one doesn't is it gives the motion blur of the speed that you're going. I sped this up, I think, to 64 times the speed that I was actually going. And so when you're going that fast, having some sort of a motion blur looks really good, at least sometimes. There's a misconception that it's always better to have proper motion blur. That's really not right. If you are trying to mimic, say, what the vehicle sees when you're driving down a road, then you would want to have motion blur. But if I was like trying to get a time lapse or a hyperlapse of a city like Cody Wano suggested doing with the GoPro Hero 7, then I would not want to have a low shutter speed, because then all of the monuments, landmarks, and attractions of your city would just be totally blurry. And so in that instance, having a high shutter speed and no motion blur when you're trying to get a hyperlapse showing what you're seeing around you will actually look much better. It depends on what you're actually trying to achieve with your hyperlapse. Now, a couple of tips that I've learned that looks good from watching other people's time lapses, even though I didn't have time to do examples for this video. When you're doing something like, say, going over a bridge, looking down at rush hour traffic, that is the perfect opportunity to use the lower shutter speed, so you get those headlights and taillights moving through your scene in like streams of light, like we love seeing in the high quality time lapses. It just wouldn't look as good if we used the time lapse movie mode. But if say you have a DIY channel and you're trying to get a time lapse of you building something, then having that motion blur would probably be a negative thing, because you're constantly going to have everything blurred out. We want to have at least the subject of a video, when we're trying to follow a subject with our eyes, we want it to be not so blurry that it's difficult to see. And if you didn't know that the M50 had a time-lapse movie mode, or you just don't know how to activate it, you want to hit your menu button, you want to go to your first tab of your shooting menu, and there you'll see at the bottom time-lapse movie mode. You'll see that you have 3 different scenes and a custom one, and then I switched the automatic exposure to every single shot. That way it gets basically the same exposure in each shot. Now, if your exposure is not going to be changing, I would suggest using manual. That way you could dial it in. But for me, who's a time-lapse noob, I always use automatic mode. If you just switch to automatic mode in your time-lapse setting, it won't actually switch to automatic. So you need to go over and switch your shooting mode to automatic. And that's it. That's how I shoot hyperlapses. And again, I'm not that experienced with them. I've done maybe 20. I would like to do more and really learn how to do super high quality hyperlapses, but I just don't have the time. As I said at the beginning of this video, it took 2 hours to get like 60 seconds worth of footage. I just don't have the time for that. That's one reason I really like slow motion. Well, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and I'll see you all in the next video.